Under the blazing sun of the Sahara, where the sands shift like the waves of time itself, stood the greatest empire mankind had ever seen: ancient Egypt. For over 3,000 years, this civilization rose and fell with the rhythm of the Nile, giving birth to kings who crowned themselves as living gods. From the humble farmers tending their crops in the fertile Nile Delta to the mighty pharaohs commanding armies of stone and gold, Egypt was a civilization obsessed with perfection, a culture carved for eternity. They didn't build their grand monuments for the living, but for what they believed came after. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, piercing the sky even today, wasn't just a tomb. It was a machine engineered for immortality, a celestial gateway. Every single stone was cut and placed with incredible precision, aligned perfectly with the stars. Because for the ancient Egyptians, death was never the end. They believed the soul, which they called the Ka, would embark on a perilous journey through the dark realm of Duat, the underworld. There it would face trials set by the gods, and ultimately be judged by Osiris, Lord of the afterlife. For those who passed, a glorious eternity awaited. But for those who failed, they would be devoured by the beast Ammit and vanish forever into an abyss of darkness. But beneath the gleaming surface of this magnificent civilization, there were secrets no one dared to speak aloud. Whispers of forbidden rituals performed in the dead of night, strange lights flickering inside sealed tombs, and eerie voices that seemed to echo from the very walls of the pyramids themselves. Some believed these were the restless spirits of the builders, their souls trapped for eternity within the stones they laid. Others, however, whispered of something else, something far older, something still alive, patiently waiting beneath the endless sands. For centuries, historians and archaeologists have admired ancient Egypt for its incredible advancements in science, engineering, and architecture. But what if their obsession with death and their mastery of the afterlife wasn't just a matter of spiritual belief? This chilling possibility came to light in 1922. When the archaeologist Howard Carter breached the sealed doorway to the tomb of Tutankhamun, he wrote in his private diary, "I felt a breath of air that had been trapped for over 3,000 years. And in that moment, something unseen passed by me." That something would soon become known to the world as the Curse of the Pharaohs, and it proved to be far more than just a superstition. Within weeks, Carter's financial sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, died suddenly from an infected mosquito bite. The strange part? At the very same hour of his death, miles away in England, Carnarvon's beloved dog howled mournfully and then dropped lifeless. A coincidence? Perhaps. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next decade, more than a dozen people connected to the tomb's opening met with untimely and often bizarre ends. But this infamous curse didn't begin in 1922. Its roots stretch far deeper into the annals of history, back to the reign of a forgotten pharaoh, a king whose name was deliberately erased from every monument, every temple, and every official record. His legacy was scrubbed from existence, a punishment reserved for the worst of heretics. Long before Tutankhamun, before the great Ramses II, there was a pharaoh who dared to defy the gods themselves, and the gods, in their divine fury, did not forgive him. His story, the true origin of the pharaoh's curse, begins where all Egyptian stories eventually end, in the city of the dead. His name was Akhenaten. He ascended to the throne not as a warrior or a builder, but as a mystic, a visionary. At the time, Egypt worshipped a vast pantheon of gods: Ra, the sun god; Osiris, the lord of the underworld; Isis, the goddess of magic. But Akhenaten declared that these were all false idols. There was only one true god, he proclaimed, the Aten, represented by the physical disk of the sun. This was a revolution, a radical shift that shook the very foundations of Egyptian society. He moved the capital from Thebes to a new purpose-built city called Amarna, dedicated solely to the worship of the Aten. He shut down the old temples, defunded the powerful priesthoods, and declared himself the sole intermediary between humanity and this one true God. The priests of the old gods were furious. Their power, their wealth, their entire way of life was threatened. They accused Akhenaten of heresy, of blasphemy. They warned that his actions would bring chaos and ruin upon the land, that the gods he had abandoned would seek their revenge. But Akhenaten, consumed by his religious fervor, did not listen. He pushed his reforms even further, commissioning artwork that broke with millennia of tradition. The rigid formal poses of past pharaohs were replaced with intimate naturalistic family scenes. Akhenaten himself was depicted with an elongated skull, a slender neck, and a protruding belly, features so unusual that some modern theorists have even speculated he may not have been entirely human. Was this just an artistic choice, or was it a true-to-life depiction of a pharaoh whose very biology was different? While most historians attribute his appearance to a new artistic style, the mystery remains. What is certain is that his reign was a time of tremendous upheaval. With the old priesthoods dismantled and the military focused on domestic affairs, Egypt's influence abroad waned. The empire began to crumble at its edges. Famine and plague swept through the land, and the people began to believe the old priests were right. The gods were angry. Akhenaten's reign ended as abruptly as it began. After 17 years on the throne, he vanished from the historical record. His death is a complete mystery. Was he assassinated by the vengeful priests? Did he succumb to the plague that ravaged his people? Or did something else happen in his sun-drenched city of Amarna? After his death, the old order returned with a vengeance. The priests of Amun-Ra reclaimed their power, and their first act was to erase Akhenaten from history. His son, Tutankhamun, was forced to change his name to Tutankhamun, abandoning the Aten and restoring the old gods. The city of Amarna was dismantled, its stones reused for other buildings. Akhenaten's statues were smashed, his inscriptions were chiseled away, and his name was struck from the official king lists. It was as if he had never existed. They called him the criminal of Amarna and pronounced a damnatio memoriae, a condemnation of memory, upon him. But you cannot simply erase a man like Akhenaten. His beliefs, his revolution, had left an indelible mark. And according to some ancient texts, the priests did more than just destroy his memory. They performed a powerful and dark ritual to bind his spirit, to curse his soul for all eternity, ensuring he would never find peace in the afterlife he so radically redefined. They believed that by damning his soul, they would protect Egypt from his heresy forever. Could this ancient ritual be the true source of the pharaoh's curse? A curse not meant for tomb robbers, but for the heretic king himself, an echo of ancient anger so powerful it could lash out across millennia. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb, he wasn't just disturbing the rest of the boy king. He was disturbing a delicate balance. Tutankhamun was Akhenaten's son, the last link to a forbidden past. Perhaps by opening that tomb, Carter inadvertently released a fragment of that ancient, vengeful magic, a curse unleashed from its 3,000-year prison. The strange deaths that followed, the unexplained phenomena, the feeling of an unseen presence, perhaps these weren't just coincidences. Perhaps they were the final dying screams of a forgotten king's fury and the dark magic used to contain it. The story of ancient Egypt is one of gods and mortals, of life and death. But in the shadows of the pyramids, in the whispers from erased tombs, lies another story, one of a king who defied heaven, and a curse that has never truly died. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think? Was Akhenaten a visionary ahead of his time, or a heretic who brought ruin upon his kingdom?
Ever heard of a king so feared? His very name was scraped from history. Archaeologists call him the Lost Pharaoh. His tomb was sealed, his name erased, and every record of his reign was systematically destroyed. It's as if an entire chapter of Egypt's glorious past was deliberately ripped out. But history, as they say, has a way of leaving behind whispers. In this case, it was a single broken tablet discovered near the ancient city of Thebes. Scratched onto its surface were a few terrifying words. He who silenced the gods. Who was this king who dared to defy the entire Egyptian pantheon? In hushed tones and forgotten texts, he was known by a single name, Nefertiti. The legends surrounding him are not tales of glory, but of darkness. They say Nefertiti turned his back on the gods who had guided Egypt for millennia. He rejected the sun god Ra, mocked Osiris, the lord of the afterlife, and instead pledged his entire kingdom to a single terrifying deity, Sutek, the god of storms, chaos, and the unforgiving desert. Under Nefertiti's rule, Egypt transformed into a land of fear. The grand temples, once centers of worship and life, were set ablaze. The priests, who held the sacred knowledge of the gods, began to vanish without a trace, and the offerings, traditionally gifts of gold, grain, and incense, took a gruesome turn. The altars, they say, began to run with blood. Even his monuments defied tradition. While other pharaohs built their pyramids reaching for the heavens, Nefertiti's were built underground. They were inverted pyramids, their peaks pointing not towards the sky, but deep into the abyss, into the darkness below the earth. Inside these subterranean tombs, a strange command was enforced. Torches had to be kept burning, day and night. Why? The few remaining records simply state they were there to keep something sealed. No one dared to ask what that something was. When Nefertiti finally died, the reaction from the priesthood was unprecedented. They refused to perform the sacred funeral rites, the very ceremonies that ensured a soul's safe passage into the afterlife. They declared his soul unfit to journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Instead of guiding him, they sought to imprison him. They performed dark and ancient rites known only as the binding of shadows. This was a powerful, desperate ritual designed to trap the pharaoh's Kahi's life force, his spiritual double inside his tomb for all eternity, preventing him from ever finding peace or reincarnation. But did it work? According to a tattered papyrus fragment later discovered near Luxor, the ritual was a catastrophic failure. The fragment describes a terrifying scene. As the priests chanted the final words of the binding, the ground began to tremble. A furious storm, a manifestation of Sutek's wrath, rose from the desert. The tomb itself shook as if it were alive, and from the depths of the sealed sarcophagus, a chilling whisper was heard, a promise that echoed through the storm. I will rise when the stars align. It was a prophecy of a return, a thread that would lie dormant beneath the sands for thousands of years. Fast forward to 2024, an ambitious Egyptian-British archaeological team, following a trail of obscure clues and forbidden texts, believed they had finally located Nefertiti's long-lost burial chamber. Deep beneath the desert, they uncovered a sealed door, untouched for millennia. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The entire surface was coated in red ochre, the color of chaos and danger, and carved into the stone were stark, terrifying warnings in ancient hieroglyphs: "He who opens this gate shall awaken the storm." It was a clear, unambiguous message from the past, a plea to leave the darkness undisturbed. They opened it anyway. Driven by the promise of discovery, fame, and a desire to rewrite history, they broke the seal. The consequences were immediate and devastating. Within hours of the tomb being breached, the clear desert sky turned black. The expedition camp was slammed by a sandstorm of unprecedented violence, a vortex of wind and sand that buried half the site in minutes. Chaos descended. Amid the howling gale, 3 members of the excavation team vanished without a trace. Their last radio transmissions were a garbled mess of static and screams, but one sound cut through the noise, a single, horrifying sound captured on the recording. It was a whisper, repeating a single word over and over again, "Ka ka ka," and deep beneath the shifting sands of Egypt, something ancient, something that had been bound in silence for millennia, began to stir. It felt as if the oldest god of chaos was breathing once more, its influence seeping back into the world. The prophecy was being fulfilled. The stars were aligning. Nefertiti, the forbidden king, was beginning his rise. The storm he promised was just the beginning. The world had forgotten him, but he had not forgotten the world. What do you think happened to those missing archaeologists? And what will happen now that the storm has been unleashed?
They say what happens in the desert stays in the desert, but sometimes what's buried there doesn't want to stay buried. In 2024, an archaeological team set out to uncover a long-lost tomb, a discovery that promised to rewrite history. They succeeded, but the footage recovered from that expedition was never made public. Officially, the mission was a failure, lost to a sudden, violent sandstorm. But the truth is far more terrifying. One archaeologist, Dr. Layla Mansour, was the sole survivor, found wandering the dunes, delirious and dehydrated. Her official report was redacted, classified. But in a hushed, off-the-record interview, she spoke of what they truly found. They didn't just find a tomb. They found a voice. It started subtly, she recounted, her own voice trembling. A faint whisper on the wind. We thought it was just the desert playing tricks on us. But as we dug deeper, the whispers grew clearer. It was ancient, guttural, a language none of us recognized, yet we all understood. The team unearthed a stone entrance buried 30 feet beneath the surface, untouched for millennia. The air that escaped was stale, but also cold. Unnaturally cold. As they ventured inside, their torches flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. The walls were covered not in celebratory scenes of gods and pharaohs, but in warnings, desperate pleas etched into the stone. Dr. Mansour described the feeling inside the passage. It was like someone was standing right behind me, she said. The air was so heavy, it felt like you could grab it. I turned, and for a split second, I swear the hieroglyphs were moving, glowing a faint, pulsating red, like veins under skin. The carvings depicted a shadowy figure with no face, consuming stars and silencing gods. Below it, a single line of text was repeated over and over, "Do not wake him who sleeps in silence." At the heart of the complex, they found the main burial chamber. Unlike the grand halls of Tutankhamun or Ramesses, this room was stark, empty, save for a single unadorned sarcophagus of black basalt in the center. There were no treasures, no canopic jars, no offerings for the afterlife. It was less a tomb and more a prison. Carved into the lid of the sarcophagus was a single, unsettling symbol: a closed eye. Dr. Mansour recognized it from obscure apocryphal texts. The Eye of Sutekh, a deity associated with storms, chaos, and the darkness between the stars. And below it, a line of faded paint, barely legible, offered one final chilling piece of the puzzle. He sleeps in storms. He wakes in silence. The team leader, against Dr. Mansour's frantic objections, gave the order to open it. The stone lid was impossibly heavy, requiring the strength of 6 people and a pulley system. The sound of stone grinding against stone echoed through the chamber like a scream. As the lid was pried open, a strange metallic smell filled the air, like ozone after a lightning strike. They peered inside, expecting to find the mummified remains of a forgotten pharaoh. But there was no mummy, no bones, no wrappings. The sarcophagus was filled with a fine black dust, as if the body inside had spontaneously combusted, burned from the inside out with an impossible heat. And there, resting in the center of the dust, was a single, perfect object, a golden funerary mask. But unlike any other, this mask had no face, no features, just a smooth, polished surface reflecting their own horrified expressions. Behind it, there was nothing, just an empty, hollow space. That night, back at the camp, the strange occurrences began. The high-powered generators that lit the site began to flicker and fail, one by one, plunging them into near-total darkness. The temperature plummeted, a biting cold that was unnatural for the Egyptian desert at night. A deep, profound silence fell over the camp, the chirping of insects, the rustle of the wind, everything just stopped. And then they began to hear it. Footsteps, soft at first, crunching on the sand just beyond the perimeter of the camp. Then closer, inside the camp, outside their tents. The sounds were heavy, deliberate. But when they shone their flashlights into the darkness, there was nothing there. The camp's security cameras, however, caught something else. On the playback, they saw them. shadows passing across the tent walls. Distorted, elongated figures, not human, not animal. Something in between. Something that moved with a disjointed, unnatural gait. Panic set in. The team's communications specialist tried to send a distress signal, but all their equipment was dead. The radios emitted only static, a strange, rhythmic static that almost sounded like breathing. Dr. Mansour described the last hours as a descent into madness. Team members whispering to themselves, staring out into the empty darkness, their faces pale with terror. One of them, a seasoned geologist, simply walked out into the desert and never came back. Dr. Mansour hid in a supply truck, clutching a small audio recorder, convinced she was losing her mind. The last thing she remembers is a profound silence descending, a silence so complete it felt like the world had ended. And then, a voice, right beside her ear, whispering in that same ancient tongue from the tomb. A voice that said, "My kingdom will rise from the silence." When the rescue team arrived a day later, they found nothing. The entire multi-million-dollar encampment, the tents, the vehicles, the equipment, the people, was gone. Vanished. The sand was smooth, undisturbed, as if no one had ever been there. It was as if the desert itself had swallowed them whole. They found only two things: a delirious Dr. Mansour, miles from the site, and the small audio recorder she was still clutching. Most of the recording was corrupted static, except for the last 10 seconds. On it, a clear, deep voice can be heard, speaking in perfect English. It says, "He is awake, and he remembers his kingdom." To this day, the site of the 2024 expedition remains a restricted military zone, sealed off by the Egyptian government. No official explanation has ever been given. The story of Dr. Mansour has been dismissed as trauma-induced delusion. But something is happening out there. Recent satellite scans of the region show something changing under the sand. A slow, massive, spiral-shaped pattern is forming, expanding outwards by several meters every single year. The official explanation is wind erosion, a natural geological phenomenon. But others, those who have heard the whispers of this story, believe something else. They say it's him, Nefersutek, the shadow pharaoh, the one who silenced the gods, slowly, patiently reclaiming his empire of shadows from beneath the dunes. As the old Bedouin proverb goes, the sands move and the land remembers. But what if the land isn't just remembering? What if it's listening, waiting for its king to return? Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows. If you enjoy stories that explore the unknown, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. Let me know in the comments what you think happened to the lost expedition. Until next time, stay curious and be careful what you dig for.